Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Ethan Rosen, assistant director at PredictIt, the stock market for politics. We're going to take a look at what traders envision for the Democratic frontrunner for the presidential election, Arizona gubernatorial race, and we'll take a look at Europe and which leader could be the next one to fall. Ethan, it's great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thank you for having me.
And there is decreasing confidence that President Biden will run again for 2024. And it's interesting to see who is emerging as a potential frontrunner.
That's absolutely right. And first, as you mentioned, we see Biden, incumbent president, incumbent first-term president, only at about a 30 to 35% chance of winning the nomination on PredictIt for 2024. Now, personally, although there are a lot of factors that go into these things, I would chalk up most of that, him being at such a low percentage, to an expectation that he's too old to run again. There is somewhat of an expectation that he ran to kind of bridge the gap between the Trump years and a new Democratic bench. The Biden camp still insists he's running. There's speculation as to avoid being a lame duck at this point, but we'll see about that. In the meantime, the market for second place in this primary has gotten really interesting. And by that, I mean, who is in second place? Kamala Harris, sitting vice president, had been second place in this primary since its inception, the expectation being that the vice president is the clear favorite to take over as the successor. Now, in really the last 2 weeks, that's changed. We've seen Kamala's stock fall. We've seen Gavin Newsom rise to second place. That's, of course, the California governor. He is building a national profile, and there are a lot of questions about whether he's planning a run. And I got to tell you, two Californians, Harris and Newsom. Newsom right now seems to be more popular. He seems to have more wind in his sails, having outperformed in the recall vote in last year. We thought he might be a dead man, but here he is, second place.
It is absolutely unbelievable, the state in both parties. And what's interesting is when we look at our next chart here, we had the Trump endorsed candidate in Arizona, for the most part, having a comfortable lead, but now you're seeing more traditional GOP politicians, if you will, backing another candidate, and they're starting to gain some ground here.
Yeah, so this is a dynamic that we've seen elsewhere. We saw this to an extent in Pennsylvania, where Republicans tried and failed, by the way, to consolidate behind a candidate to challenge the kind of Trump QAnon, we'll call it, wing, Mastriano. Here we have Kari Lake. She has been the longtime frontrunner in this race. She got the Trump endorsement and seemed to be on a glide path to victory. But the GOP, they're really, I hate to say, they're afraid that she's going to win the primary, both because they don't like her and because there's fear that she would lose to a Democrat. Arizona, of course, is increasingly purple, voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 election. And here they have a frontrunner whose primary platform is that she wants to challenge the 2020 election 2 years later. So we've seen some GOP officials, Doug Ducey, the sitting governor in Arizona, who's going to be replaced, and Mike Pence, of all people, have a late rally behind Karen Rosen. Predicted traders are seeing a surge. She was in the single digits or low double digits until recently. Now she's in the 30s. There are signs of consolidation against Lake, who is viewed as being too extreme. One of the dynamics that I have to say I think is very interesting here is you have Pence endorsing against Trump for the second time in a major way, the first being in Georgia when Pence backed Kemp ended up handily beating Trump back Purdue, although always a caution, there are always a lot of factors at play in these races, and the Kemp and Trump endorsement, or the Pence and Trump endorsements, were one of many.
Yeah, it seems like as if more established GOP players like a Pence are not quite as ready to get on the Trump train as they may have been in the past. It seems as if they're trying to pull their party back a little bit more towards the center. I mean, you're seeing that with the Democrats as well. I think this one extreme faction to the other, it's not playing well with the average American who wants to be a little bit more in the center. And I think that's going to be really key for the midterms and when we head into 2024. But let's switch gears and discuss Europe for a moment. And their leaders aren't faring that well either.
Yeah, so we, of course, in the last couple of weeks, we saw Boris Johnson, his saga, which had been tumultuous for some time, seems to be headed towards resolution. He resigned as Tory leader, which effectively means that he will be replaced as Prime Minister of the UK once a new Tory leader is chosen. The expectation is that that will happen in early September. And that Johnson will stay on until then. Now that could change. He could be ousted earlier, we'll see, or he could leave earlier. Draghi, meanwhile, in Italy, is facing a whole lot of problems. He has actually attempted to resign, only to be rebuffed by the president, who did not accept his resignation. This came after one of his governing partners, which is known as the Five Star Movement, effectively pulled out, or indicated that they were planning to pull out of his coalition, in part over Draghi's support for Ukraine. Which means that, Italians have to endure higher gas prices, similar things that we're seeing here, where there are real consequences to that. So predicted traders at this time are betting that Draghi is going to stay on at least until September, meaning that in kind of the battle between Draghi and the Five Star Movement, they think that the Five Star Movement is going to capitulate, but there's a long way to go between now and early September. In Italian politics, a day is an eternity. So we're really far from resolution to this thing.
All right, Ethan, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thank you for having me.